This is episode 34 of the Indie Film Academy podcast. Today we're talking with James Cullen Bressack as part of our October Shockathon that's in November. So,
welcome to the Indie Film Academy podcast, where it's all about learning how to make and market your independent film online. And now your host, Jason Buff.
hey everybody, welcome to the Indie Film Academy podcast. This is another episode in our October Shockathon in November. So today I'm talking with a really inspirational filmmaker, James Cullen Bressack. He has, I think he's around 23 or something, and he's already made 11 feature films. He's one of the people that will tell you, just get out there and start making movies. Even if your first one sucks, or whatever, just get out there, start making movies, and start getting good, and you can build a career that way. One thing that I thought was really interesting was a quote that he said from John Carpenter, which was basically, if you want to be a horror filmmaker, just keep making horror films, and you'll eventually become kind of an industry into yourself. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Don't forget to sign up for our free masterclass on film sales. Go to ifamasters.com and you can sign up for our free 2-day masterclass. We have 15 presenters, experts in distribution, who are going to teach you how to sell your film, how to make a living as a filmmaker, how to promote your film, all kinds of things you need to know to start making a living as a filmmaker. Also, if you want to get a free filmmaking audiobook, go to ifafreebooks.com and you can have 2 filmmaking books. One of my favorites is Robert McKee's story. So one of the things that I do when I write a screenplay is while I'm writing it, I'll drive around with something like Story or one of my favorite screenwriting books, and it's like having a coach sitting there, having Robert McKee sitting beside you in the car, coaching you on filmmaking. So go to ifafreebooks.com and download your 2 free filmmaking audiobooks. Okay, here's my interview with James Cullen Bressack.
So, this is Thailand.
It looks amazing.
This is going to be an unforgettable experience. Guys, look at this.
Whoa.
So, girls, what's the plan for tonight, huh?
Yeah, we'll dance, we'll drink, make bad decisions.
Ooh, God, look at them. They're so creepy. They won't stop staring at us.
You gonna let me buy you a drink?
Oh, man.
Stay away from me. Stay away from me with that.
I had the strangest dream.
I had a similar dream. I had the same dream.
They took that life-size gold statue. What do you mean there is no gold statue? What the hell happened last night?
This is the golden statue. Born from a very dark place. It feels jealousy, anger, resentment. She chose you.
Everything about this just screams, get the hell out.
She's what we made her. She cannot be stopped.
These rituals are real to them.
I killed someone.
It had to be done.
Really had the nerve to just say, hey, I'm going to go for it and make something, even though you might have had fears of whatever kind.
So I guess it is story time then.
Yeah, perfect.
So, I loved movies my entire life. Growing up, I was super into film, and then my dad got really sick when I was 12 or 13. He was having liver failure, and all him and I could do was watch movies because he was bedridden. And then I started to realize at that point that, film was such a you know, it was such a beautiful thing that anybody could share. And thankfully, my dad got better. He got a liver transplant. And then, you know, when my parents got divorced and I was going through a rough time from that, my mom lived right next door to a movie theater. So I would just walk to the movie theater every day, and it became like, you know, sanctuary.
Right.
And mind you, like, you know, I decided like I was going to go into, I didn't originally go into film. I went into like the rave party scene, and I started, you know, promoting events and doing, you know, social media for DJs. And I was like, you know, first I started, there was a photography company that I was working for, and I was like, well, I want to get into all these events for free, so we offer the photography. So then everybody started coming to our website to get their photos. So then I started saying, okay, well, we could sell ad space on the website for the event. So we started doing that because everybody was already going to the thing. Then I started going, well, who likes getting their photos taken more than the DJs? So I started having people take photos of the DJs, and then so I started making connections with DJs, and then I started going, well, I could be like a booking agent for DJs and all this stuff. And I was partying really hard and really putting that together, like 15, 16, 17, like was really super intense with that, and actually started throwing events and building that up, building up promotions and promotional skills. And mind you, I was not, what comes with partying is getting drunk and doing some drugs and stuff. And I got a phone call from my grandmother, saying that she saw photos of me on Facebook and was like, don't lie to me, you're doing drugs. Damn. And I was like, no, I'm not. And she said, no, really, don't lie to me, you're doing drugs. Like, I know you are. And I said, you know, no, I'm just like, you know, I'm making money and throwing these parties and stuff. And she was like, you know, what happened to you wanting to make movies? You said your entire life you wanted to make movies. So, you know, why aren't you doing that? And, you know, that really resonated with me. And she was like, you know, I'm going to send you money to make your first movie. You know, go out there and make a movie. You can always build a skyscraper from the top down, so do it. And I was like, okay. And so she sent me a check for $50. It was, you know, she's Jewish grandmother. But it was the sentiment that mattered to me. And so I started writing a script.
Right,
and
okay.
I wrote that script, and I was in a junior college at the time, going to transfer to a regular college eventually, but I was taking film classes in the junior college at SMC. And, you know, first couple of days in that class, I realized I was the only one who really, really cared about, you know, film and understood it. You know, and understood the layers and what have you. A lot of people were just taking it as an elective class because it's easy. And, you know, so I was writing the script, and I told myself, Robert Rodriguez only needed $7,000 to make his first film. All I need is $7,000. If I could get $7,000, I'm going to drop out of college and, you know, make this movie. But I had put my life on track to do that. I stopped partying, just cut it all off, and focused only on that. Took up a job at a sandwich restaurant. And I remember I had a meeting with a friend that was thinking about investing in the movie. And I also, at the exact same time, had a shift at the sandwich restaurant. So I called in and I said, you know, I can't come into work today. I have to go meet with my friend who's in from out of town to finance a movie. And they're like, well, you know, the boss is on the phone, and he's like, you know, that's ridiculous. And I'm like, no, I really have to go do this. And he's like a real movie? And I was like, yeah, a real movie. And, you know, it's like a $7,000 budget, but it's, you know, I'm going to make a real movie. And he goes, yeah, well, do you want to go, you know, follow pipe dreams and make silly movies, or do you want to have a job? Because if you don't show up, you're not going to have a job anymore. And I said, right. I want to make movies. And I hung up the phone, obviously was fired, never went back there, but luckily that friend financed the movie for $7,000. And so I made my first movie for $7,000 and titled it My Pure Joy. Now, the interesting thing about that is My Pure Joy was the title of the events company and photography company that I was doing the rave promotions for. So throwing those events, doing the photography and all that stuff. And, you know, any given night we'd be pulling, you know, 10 to 20,000 people to an event. Mm-hmm. So all those people saw the title, saw that I was involved, and, you know, I got support from DJs and stuff, and there's some music from them in the movie. But, and the movie's not that great. But because of that and the promotional base I had built up in the rave scene, either they thought it was a rave movie or they just recognized the title or something happened, but it got onto the bestsellers list on Amazon.
Wow.
Through the promotion and all that stuff. So 18 years old, made my first movie, got onto the bestsellers list on Amazon, and it was like number 32 in horror. It was like outselling the season of True Blood at the time. That was on like DVD. It was insane. Right. I never saw a dime of it, by the way, and that's a different story. My distributor totally screwed me over. But what I did see is that these movies could find an audience. Mm-hmm. But regardless, even though it got onto the bestsellers list and yada, 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 and, you know, looking back, I'm totally ashamed of that movie, but it didn't get me more work. And so I was like, well, I need to make another movie. So I turned to the same investor, and I say, let's make another movie. And this time I go out and make a movie called Hate Crime. I was like, found footage is really big. I'm going to do found footage completely different. And so I did a home invasion found footage film, which ended up getting banned in the UK, one of like 3 movies in the past 15 years to be banned in the UK. Like just an outright ban. Right. But it also played film festivals. And I went the festival route this time instead of the other time because I was like, you know, more in tune with what I figured would work. And so it got a lot of press, but it didn't, you know, catch as much steam as I had wanted it to. Even though it had all this press, it didn't get a big release.
Was that the home invasion where the Nazis and all that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, correct. And so, like, you know, there was a larger distributor that was interested in acquiring the film. Okay. We were talking about it, and it was going to get a big release because there was all this buzz from the festivals. And in the opening scene of that movie, the child gets shot in the face, you know, which I thought was super shocking and stuff. But it was also probably the worst decision I had made for the film because while we're in the middle of negotiations with a distributor, Sandy Hook happened. And so nobody wanted to touch a movie that a child would get killed in because we just had this horrible tragedy that happened in the world. Right. You know, I'm not sure if you're familiar with what happened at Sandy Hook, but somebody went into a building. So
like an elementary school shooting.
A moot point. The movie stayed on a shelf after playing film festivals for like a year or two, and then finally got released. But it didn't get the attention that I wanted it to, and it didn't get released how I wanted it to, and it wasn't getting me more work. And I was like, you know, I need to start getting hired for stuff. And so I was doing all these interviews at the time, and I had been preaching to every single person. You know, everybody says, you know, I want to make a movie. How do I do that? And I always said, go out there and make one. You know, all that matters is the story. Mm-hmm. You know, if you don't have a budget, make it work without the budget. Well, you know, I had preached that so often as like, you know, when people said, how do you do this? I said, that's how you do it. And yet I was stuck with 2 movies and no career. And then I was like, well, I have $500, literally $500, and I don't own a camera, but what I do own is a cell phone. And a cell phone is a camera everybody has, right? I had an iPhone. So I went out and I was like, I'm going to make a movie, be the first full-length feature on an iPhone, shoot it for the money that I had, practice what I preach, basically. Follow that, like, my suggestion of, like, you know, just pick out the camera and do it. All that matters is a good story. And with that, I made a movie called To Jennifer. And now To Jennifer got a whole bunch of publicity, played some film festivals, and everybody was fascinated by the fact that at that time I was like 19 years old, maybe turning 20. Everybody was like, a young kid makes movies on an iPhone for like no budget. Everybody thought that was the coolest thing in that situation. It was marketable or whatever. And then from that, I had people contacting me to make movies. And from there, I've been able to somewhat sustain an indie career. So
Now,
it's a long story, but I feel like people need all the details to understand the progression. So basically, my suggestion to anybody is you have to, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. And to be a filmmaker, you have to be insane. Because even though I had some success with my first 2 movies, it took me doing a third movie literally with an iPhone and no money to actually get where I wanted to go. So you have to have that never say die attitude and just keep driving. And, sometimes it gets hard. Sometimes it gets really hard. And you're in a situation where you're like, should I keep doing this? And the people that continue to do it are the ones that will survive in this industry. And that's what you have to do. You have to never say die and just keep pushing forward and ensure that you survive by fighting for your dream.
Were there moments before that when you were just kind of like, okay, maybe I should go back to the sandwich shop?
Oh my God, there were so many moments where I was like that. And so, everybody wonders, I have this tattoo on my knuckles that says life. And I tattooed that on my knuckles because it was to get rid of my fallback. You can't work a restaurant job if you have tattoos on your hands. So I was like, I'll tattoo this on my hands because this is what my life is. Like, don't do the fallback. I just have to keep moving and survive.
Right. How important has the ability to, promote yourself played in your career? Have you used that or can we talk a little bit about what happened after To Jennifer? I mean, are you more or less a director for hire now, or what kind of work did you do after that? I mean, I know the films that you've done, but how did things change?
It's a little bit of both,
Okay.
So for 13, which was the next one I did, I was asked by Asylum to write and direct the movie, but it was within their parameters. You know what I mean? So what I've learned is, I wouldn't say I'm a director for hire per se, although I do get hired to do stuff that I didn't write as well. Like a perfect example is Blood Lake, which I did for Animal Planet. I didn't write that. I was approached to direct it, and I did that with it starred Christopher Lloyd and Shannon Doherty. But I still create my own stories as well. Like Bethany I wrote that with a writing partner and develop it. So it depends. Like sometimes people approach me and want me to write and direct and come from the ground up. And other times people just want me to direct. And other times people just want me to write. So, I just make myself available for that. So what I've learned is, when more of other people's money becomes involved, then you have more opinions and more ideas. And so you have to, it becomes more collaborative versus just a singular idea. Now I don't think that's a bad thing, but it is what does start to occur. So I definitely think that I try to keep everything within the wheelhouse of what I mentally like to create, and I try to make movies that I would want to watch.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How was it working with I've had some relationships with the people over at the Asylum. I actually did an interview with the writer of Sharknado, and I love their kind of business model, in terms of, we talk a lot about just trying to make, building a career and the kind of dichotomy between making movies that will sell, that are commercial, and also trying to make really, quality movies. You know what I mean?
I think, when you make a movie for the Asylum, you're making a movie for the Asylum. However, they're like the Roger Corman of this generation. Like you're fitting into their cookie cutter mold, but you're also, gaining a lot of experience and you're also, making something that is marketable. And so, you're following their mold, but I don't think that's a bad thing per se. Like sometimes you make like a movie for you and you make a movie for everybody else. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And I think nowadays with cameras being so accessible, we're past the time of, people making like, 1 or 2 or 5 movies, and then they're like, that's my career. It's now, since movies are so much lower budgets, to have a career, you have to continually make multiple films. And so to do that, I think, it's sometimes you do one for you, sometimes you do one for them, but you have to just make sure that it fits within your world.
Right. Okay. Now, can you talk a little? I'm just curious, since all this stuff is going on with Back to the Future, what it was like working with Christopher Lloyd.
Oh, Christopher Lloyd was super awesome. He's an awesome guy. He's a sweetheart, and he's a
very quiet guy,
funny.
as far as
yeah,
I've seen.
He's very quiet. He's very stoic. And very friendly. And
was it intimidating to be in that situation, to have to direct actors that you kind of had grown up with?
It wasn't intimidating per se, but I will say it was definitely nerve-wracking, because I had to keep telling myself, don't ask him to quote Back to the Future. Just over and over in my head, wow, because that was my movie when I was a kid. 2 movies I loved as a kid were Back to the Future and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And he was in both of them. So I'm literally, giving him direction, and while I'm saying one thing, in my head the whole time it's going, and don't say anything about a gigawatt, don't say anything about, a DeLorean.
Just give me one Marty.
Marty.
Come on. I know you can do it.
Yeah, he was awesome. He was a great guy.
Do you have any insights into what you've learned in terms of dealing with actors and getting a good performance? Now that we're kind of just talking about actors.
Definitely. I think, I like to have an open dialogue with all of my actors. And so, I think the best performances come from when you can have that conversation and that dialogue with the actors. So, I like to go through, if the actor allows me to, go through the script with them, before we start shooting. So, think of each character as a blank canvas. And, even if I wrote the script, I take my ideas about the character, and they take their ideas about the character, and we throw them at the canvas. And whatever fits for both of us is what we use to paint the picture of who this person is before, after, and underneath what is actually on the page. Because the script is only a blueprint. So finding that and finessing those little moments and those little motivations with the actor, and finding out, who that actor is as a person, and seeing what you could pull from their actual life into the character, kind of allows it to be more of a real, fully rounded person.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Did you study anything or read? I mean, how did you kind of get to where you are, learning how to deal with actors? Is there one of the things I love to talk about is resources where people kind of can learn. I know there's a couple of good books out there about dealing with actors. I was just curious.
I mean, I read a ton of books. I only like reading nonfiction, so I'll read a lot of books on filmmaking and acting and all that stuff. But I will say I learned the most from just going out there and doing it. So
okay.
I like to claim that my first film, even though I think it, as I have said many times now that I'm not happy with it, it was my film school. So going out there and making that movie was a crash course in everything that I realized is wrong with how I make movies. And I'm like, I got to do this different, and I got to do it better. And so I think I learn and grow each time that I make a movie. So, it's a trial and error sort of thing, I believe. And it's also, just I feel like if you don't learn and you don't grow, then there's no point in continuing to do it, because you can't get better.
Right. Now, what I want to do is kind of break up the process and what you do when you go through a film, and I know your father was or I don't know, still writing, or is your father?
My dad still writes. My dad wrote, cartoons and stuff, and he still does. He was one of the writers.
Okay. I was curious if you could talk about your process for writing, how you start with an idea, how do you get to your final draft of a screenplay, and possibly some of the things that you learned from your dad.
So, I'll have an idea, and then I'll flesh that idea out into a treatment. And that treatment will become like a beat sheet. So it'll go like beat by beat what's going to happen in this movie. And then I'll take that and flesh that out into the first draft of the script. And that'll become more cohesive, and then I'll start to rewrite what I've done, if that makes sense.
Okay. Right.
So, for me, when I have my idea, I always try to, it comes in like a flash. I'll be like, oh, this is what the idea is. And usually I'll think of the idea and the ending. I always want to know where I end, because if I know where I end, I know what I can fill in the middle.
Okay.
So I don't consider it an idea for a movie until I know what my ending is.
Do you have any sort of, like, in terms of structure, how do you just come up with something on your own? Do you use, like, some of the people that I've talked to who are screenwriters talk about, they'll watch a film that's kind of similar to theirs and just, like, take bits and pieces of, like, where they're at certain moments or whatever like that. I mean, and then there's other people that use, like, Save the Cat or The Hero's Journey and things like that.
So I use The Hero's Journey. The warrior, the martyr, the wanderer, all that. I definitely, a lot of my ideas will come from, I'll look at, like, a poster for a movie, and I'll be like, in my head, oh, that's what this movie's about. And then I'll see the movie, and the movie's not about that at all. And then I'll be like, well, then that movie doesn't exist, the one that I thought of in my head. So now I have an idea for a movie. I assumed that this was what the movie was, because I create the story from looking at what the artwork is, and I'll be like, oh, yeah, this is what this movie is. And then I watch it, and I'm like, no, it's not that. So I can make that.
Right. Yeah, I was just talking recently with the guy, a guy that writes for Pixar and Disney, and he was. I always wondered this about screenwriting. People that are, that's like their main thing is being a screenwriter. And I asked him if he just sits there and watches movies and comes up with ideas. Like, a lot of people think that, like, as writers, you're sitting there having ideas just out of nowhere. And he's like, no, I sit there and I'll watch a movie that's kind of similar to what I'm writing, but my brain is like so, like, creative or whatever that I start creating my own story as I'm watching that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely watch a lot of movies for sure. It's important to keep, keyed in with the demographic. Right.
So after you made To Jennifer, can you talk about a little bit about your career after that and lead us into kind of where you're at now?
So after I made To Jennifer, I talked with the guys at the asylum and got 13-13-13.
Okay.
And then after 13-13-13...
Now, was that just like you came in, there was a screenplay written, or did you wrote the screen? Okay.
So basically, as a kid, I went to Comic-Con all the time with my dad while he was promoting Thinking the Brain and Animaniacs and all that stuff, and I used to buy a whole bunch of DVDs. Well, I always loved horror, and the people selling horror DVDs were the asylum. And so they'd have a booth at Comic-Con, and I'd go up to them and buy a crap ton of DVDs from them. And so they remembered me. And so I was like, hey, you guys remember a kid that bought a whole bunch of DVDs from you, like over and over again at Comic-Con? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, well, I'm that kid, but I'm more grown up now, and I actually make movies. Can I make one for you guys? And so they decided to meet with me, and that's how 13-13-13 came about.
Okay.
And then after 13-13-13...
what was that? I mean, can you just talk about, like, that experience? Was that a different kind of filmmaking that you go from making a movie on a...
For sure. It was definitely... Okay. They moved at a faster pace than I was used to. I had 3 days to write the entire script. From concept to script.
Sure, okay.
I was given 3 days to write the script, And then 2 days later, I was going into production.
Wow.
It was like boom, boom,
That's
boom.
kind of mind-blowing. Yeah.
I know, I was like, what? They're like, hey, you want to make a movie? Good, you're making a movie. See? Yeah.
You got 3 days.
You got 3 days. No, and I actually have a video somewhere on my like Instagram or whatever it is of me like writing the script, and I'm literally like hopped up on Red Bulls, doing like jittery like fucking 5 a.m. Just like hammering away at the script that I had 3 days to write.
Okay, so all right, we can move on to the next thing then. I mean, I'm going to come back and touch on a couple of topics that we're talking about, but what after that, what was your next film?
So based off of all of the stuff I had done, I was approached by Benetton Hillen to do a horror movie. They wanted me to write and direct a horror movie that would be based in Thailand, and that horror movie was Pernicious. So we started developing that, and we shot it a little later, and then that one is actually now on Netflix, and it was released limited theatrical in the States, and did some film festivals around the world. I flew to like Australia and stuff.
Right.
For it, but it's it was a great experience, and then I think from doing those, I had more of a reel of realistic looking movies versus these lower budget found footage. Oh damn! Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, my phone just it's been like lit up this whole time, and then it just like shut off, and I was like,
okay.
Did my phone just like short circuit on me? That's why I was like, oh damn. I had more realistic looking movies. They weren't all found footage. They looked like more.
You had a real DP working on it, yeah.
And so I was able to cut a reel from those, and that reel was able to get me more work.
Okay. Do you have? Was there a point in this process where you got an agent who was like, pitching you to different projects, or how? What is the process, or is it just reputation?
I've done it all on my own up until fairly recently. In the past 3-4 months, I got a manager and an entertainment lawyer, and I'm now talking with agencies.
Okay. Now, can you talk about shooting in Thailand? That's got to be pretty.
It was a
interesting.
Trip. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah?
It was a crazy experience shooting in Thailand. I had to have a translator for my translator, and it was crazy because we pull up on a boat in the movie, and this boat comes up to the house, and it looks cool, but that was actually the front lawn. It was supposed to be a cab, and we got so flooded that it had to be a boat because we were shooting during monsoon season. So I had to wade through water up to my ankles.
Wow.
And I've never gotten more mosquito bites in my life. But it was also amazing. It was
right.
It was very, a very amazing journey, and I don't think I'll soon forget it.
Was it produced by? I mean, how did you guys end up there? What was the?
So Benetton Hillen is a American/Thai company, so it has offices in America and Thailand. Okay. So it was always going to take place in Thailand.
Right. Now, one of the things that we deal with a lot is talking about the current state of kind of distribution, film sales, and things like that. And, one of the things that people, the thing that I hear from a lot of sales agents and people that deal with, distribution is that, that horror has become, a couple of years ago, it was like all the horror movies were exploding and everything was, that was what everybody wanted to make, and then it just became oversaturated. And I was wondering what your take was on the current kind of state of distribution of horror films, and that topic?
I definitely think that, it's not oversaturated because there's just such an appetite for it in the market. Maybe sales-wise, distributors are less inclined to pick up horror movies that don't have names in them. However, you have the viewer that just loves watching horror. The horror fans are very dedicated.
You had mentioned something earlier about your film getting kind of screwed with distribution. I was curious what happened there.
No comment. Just
okay.
know that distributors are not always on the up and up, and read the contract as best as you can.
Okay, enough said. I understand. That's one of the things. We tried to teach about film sales. We have an entire thing coming up that talks about making distribution deals and understanding
what you get up front is like what you're going to see. Like there's no such thing as a back end. From my experience, because somehow no matter how much the movie makes, they're able to claim like, oh well, this and this and this and this cost us this, and so you actually owe us money now.
Right.
They don't actually go that far as to say that, but I'm just being exaggerating. But it's like I don't understand how movies can sell so well on DVD and then yet somehow they've claimed like, well, it miraculously cost $1 bazillion to promote that, even though you did all the promotions for it on your own.
There was an interesting. I was watching an interview with you talking about a experience you had on a set before you made To Jennifer, where you and the producer kind of butted heads. And I was wondering if you could talk about that just a little bit. Because I think it's interesting that people, when you look at filmmaking from an outsider's perspective, you don't really understand kind of what actually goes on. You know what I mean?
It was a low budget movie. It was a strenuous situation, and it was a scene with nudity, and they called for the actress asked for a closed set, which is completely, standard operating procedure. And so everybody who wasn't essential had to leave the room, and the producer flipped out and was like, fuck that, I paid this chick to see your tits. And so she has like a meltdown. The producer's being super rude, and then, he's basically telling me that I have to tell her that she has to go in there and like be naked, and he has to be allowed to see it. And I'm like, that's so unbelievably grimy and sleazy, and I don't want to be involved with that. And so he's like, you either do this or it's like, my way or the highway. And I said, the highway then. I got fired off of that project.
What is the feel like when you're on set and are dealing with really kind of graphic violence? Is it obviously to the viewer it feels really horrifying and terrifying, but is it? Do you kind of like
the silliest, most fun time on set? Because, like,
okay.
You're seeing everything get built and like going through all the stages, and everybody, people light up when you have fake blood on set. It's like taking an energy shot. Everybody gets energetic again. So it's funny, like the torture scenes in Pernicious are brutal and disgusting, and like the behind the scenes is us like laughing while making these things. So it's like it's kind of funny to like people watch it and they're all grossed out, and then like a take will end and like all of us are like wow, this is we just did this, and everybody, it's like a release, tension and release. Now,
you have talked to, you're friends with Eli Roth, it seems very similar in a lot of ways. Like, have his films influenced you?
I was very influenced by Eli's films. I got an Elite Hunting tattoo from Hostel on my chest when I was like,
that's awesome.
Years old. I got that tattooed on my chest. So, I've always been a huge fan of Eli's movies. And, Eli's a really nice guy, and an unbelievably supportive person towards indie film.
Now, your $7,000 film, how can you talk a little bit about how you put that together? What happened through, walk us a little bit through the process of putting that together.
I'm going to sound so silly saying this, but it was so long ago, I'm not quite sure what the process was. I just remember I did it all wrong.
Okay.
And, well,
or can you even tell us like what you did wrong that you've learned since then? Like what are some of the main mistakes you made with the first films you made and how you've corrected that?
I didn't hire any crew. It was basically just like me, one other person, a camera, a couple lights, a microphone that I was holding in my hand. I was like booming and mixing at the same time, and I had never mixed sound before. And then I ended up editing the movie, like, you know, I was pretty much probably running craft services as well. It was like just basically like me, my producer, another person, and then the actors. So like, you know, like it definitely I don't know what we did or how we put it together. It's, you know, it was like a scrappy ragtag thing, and we managed to make a movie, which is, you know, amazing in a sense. It's why, like, you know, I don't know how it happened, and I don't think I'll ever quite understand how it did now, looking back. However, like, you know, I've been spoiled since, because I'll have like crews, like, you know, my last crew was like 100+ people, you know, working on the movie, not including the actors. You know, like I actually had like departments and stuff. So it's like, you know, I would love to see, you know, filmmakers go back to doing a movie with no crew and see what they can do. Because I like, you know, I've produced projects since too, and like, you know, when I'm putting them together, I'm like, how are you going to do this without insurance, and how are you going to do this without this? And I'm like, you know, my first 2 movies, I didn't do it with any of that stuff. I just kind of went out there and did it. So I think, you know, there's some magic in the idea of going out there and doing it. That like once you move forward, it's hard to go back to, because you don't remember how to. So I think part of the adventure is literally just going out there and doing it and going on that adventure. You know, and you put it together however you can. You know, the first time you make a movie, if you don't have a lot of money, the only thing that matters is getting it made.
Do you ever have like anxiety and things that you have to deal with when you're on the set, and you know, learn how to kind of compartmentalize that as you get through the day?
You know, I don't have anxiety on sets. You know, I've been doing this for a while now. I've directed like 11 feature films.
Right.
And, you know, I've spent so much time on set that it just, you know, it's a fun, relaxing time for me that I'm used to. And it's just, you know, everything is done in pre-production. You put it all together in pre-production, and that's how you'll know how to work it, basically. You know, plan ahead, and if you plan everything, you'll be fine.
What is your typical preparation if you're going to go shoot a scene? Do you have a notebook full of the things, the shots that you're going to get and everything? How do you kind of plan for the day that's coming?
I do an entire shot list, and I work out that shot list after I do it. You know, I'll shot list with the DP, then I'll show that shot list to my AD so my AD can schedule it correctly. And then, you know, I'll have done all the pre-production with my art team so they know how I want the room or wherever we're shooting to look. I'll have talked with my DP about the look and feel so we know what our lighting setup and color is going to be. I'll draw little diagrams of how I'm going to be blocking the actors for the scene, so I'm not coming up with the blocking. I'm just naturally placing them where I need them so that my shot selection will work. So it's, you know, everything planning ahead. And I also write notes. Like I pre-direct, where I'll write notes throughout my entire script, since I talked with all the actors about what their motivation is for certain things, so that I can remind them, hey, you know, we're thinking this in this place, or like, you know, their moment before was this, so that I can keep them in that moment. So I have notes throughout my entire script that my script will have more of my handwriting than actual typing on it.
Now, the post-production process, how long does that typically last?
It depends. You know, post-production, you can have a good, fast, and cheap, but you can only choose 2.
Right.
Yeah. So it's if you want it good and fast, it's not going to be cheap, and if you want it good and cheap, it's not going to be fast. And if you want it, fast and cheap, it's not going to be good. So that's what you have to figure out.
Are you involved? I mean, how important is, you come from a background of promotion. And one of the things that we teach a lot is that filmmakers from the very beginning, when they first start a project, need to be making a connection with an audience. And I assume that now that you've got a following, you've got people that, know your name and know what's coming next. But can you talk a little bit about the, things you learned when you were doing promotion and how to, get the word out?
Promote your stuff. I cannot stress that enough. Promote it as much as you possibly can. Build a Twitter following. If you're a filmmaker without a Twitter because you're like, oh, I don't really like Twitter, or because, I don't get it or whatever, then you're doing something wrong. You have to be on Twitter. You have to have something to promote your projects. You got to work your social media. You have to be promoting your stuff. Go on as many podcasts as possible. Go on, do as many written interviews as possible. Do as much stuff to promote your projects as possible. Always have constant press coming out, or it will fade away. That's how a movie ceases to exist. Is you don't get the word out because you have to set yourself apart from all the other films. Because that's the one thing. The market does have a lot of films on the market, but not all of them are promoted. So if you promote your film a lot, it will seem more special than the ones nobody else has heard of. It takes 3 times for somebody to be exposed to something for them to be familiar with it. So you want them to be like, oh, look, they're talking about it on this website. 2 days later, oh, look, it's on my newsfeed. They're talking about it on this website. Oh, look, it's over here. Maybe I should check that out.
Do you rely on the distribution to do any publicity, or is that kind of like...
I don't rely on anybody but myself. When it comes to promotion, always rely on yourself.
Okay.
Nobody will care about promoting your movie more than you will.
Do you think that's played a pretty a big role in your career? Is just having that mindset of being like, I've got to promote this, instead of saying, a lot of the people I talk to, and I've got a lot of friends actually that, I come from a different generation of filmmakers and everything, and they don't necessarily understand that importance. And I've talked to a couple of filmmakers that I was like, so what's your Twitter? And they're like, what are you talking about? It's like, I haven't really gotten into Twitter yet. And it's like, it doesn't make any...
That's insane to me. That's insane to me. I think I wouldn't have a career if I didn't have promotion.
Yeah.
So I think it's so paramount. It's so key that you just have to do it. You have to be keyed into it, or it's, you're wasting time because you're making a movie nobody will see.
If you were take for example, if you were hired on just to be in your role as a producer, outside of producing the film, what are the key things that you would do to promote a film?
Set up interviews, send out press releases, make sure that we have behind the scenes videos, make sure that the actors are doing interviews. It's important that there's constant information coming out about this movie, because not only is it A, hyping up for the release of the movie, but B, when Joe Schmo is walking through, let's say at Walmart, and they see your movie there, and then they say, oh, I've never heard of this, let me look it up on Google. You want something to pop up. You want them to be like, oh, look, all these people talked about it, or all these reviews were there. You want something to pop up. Now,
when you're writing press releases, do you go directly to different places like Fangoria and places like that and say, hey, let me tell you about my movie?
Yeah, I go directly. I've developed an entire list of people that I go to.
Hi, everybody at home. We had a little communication problem, but then I called James back, and here's the second half of the interview. Technology and everything, and, in my generation, we... had to rely on 16 millimeter, and if you even thought about shooting on a video camera, it just looked terrible, No,
definitely. I think, there's pluses and minuses of both generations, because there's pitfalls to having cameras be so accessible is that there's so many more indie films made now than there were back then. So back then it was easier to get noticed and have a career after making a movie. Mind you, they made much better movies, and it was harder to get a movie made. But once you did, it was easier to get attention for it. Mm-hmm. And now, because there's so many more options and so many more things, it's harder. Because, people have Netflix now. They didn't have Netflix then. Back in the day, you'd watch a movie, you'd be lucky if it was released on, home video and before home video, you'd watch a movie and then it would just no longer exist. Like you would never see it.
Mm-hmm.
Now people are given the option of watching, any 6,000 movies that they want to at any given point on their Netflix account. So it's harder. It's harder to get attention, but not harder to get it made. It's easier to get it made, but harder to get attention for it. So if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it really feels like there are just thousands and thousands of like horror movies being made. It baffles me how you being in your situation, how you deal with that many. I assume that a lot of them are just not very good and just kind of like riffs on somebody else's film. I mean, how do you see most of the films that, do you see a lot of the ones that are just from like indie people, like, making small films in their backyard and stuff like that?
I watched a lot of, and part of them kind of what inspired me to make my first one, because at such a young age, because I saw some really shitty movie that was probably made on like no budget, and I picked it up at a Blockbuster, and it was like, really, really bad. Really bad quality. Had to have been like only a couple $1,000 budget. I picked it up at Blockbuster, watched it. I was like, if this movie could be made and go to Blockbuster, and people watch it, like trick me into watching it, then I could definitely make something. Which I don't know if that's the best opinion to have, but at the time it definitely got me going.
Well, I mean, it's important because it's what inspired you. I mean, sometimes it's intimidating to see the really high quality stuff, but sometimes being able to kind of see the matrix, seeing, okay, well, there might be 50,000 films being made every year, but probably 90% of those aren't very good.
Yeah,
Sorry?
a large majority of them don't even get released. So
what is it for you? Like when you're writing a story and putting together a film, I mean, what do you do to really bring the audience in? What is there something that you see that you've kind of learned to do that you see other filmmakers not really kind of catching on in terms of what brings people into a horror movie or a movie in general?
I mean, for me, I think it's like character study films. The more you make the movie about a sole person, the more we can relate, because you want to connect with a person. If you can't connect with somebody, you can't enjoy the movie. But if you can connect with somebody in the movie, you're going to be like, oh, I care about what happens to this person. So making sure you have that connectable person and then basing it around that. Because a perfect example is, you watch a TV show, you want to see what shenanigans on that TV show, whatever character you enjoy is going to get into that week. Right. It doesn't mean they have to be the most likable person. Like, look at Breaking Bad. But he was fascinating, so we wanted to see what he was doing each week. We wanted to see how he was going to all work out for him.
So what are the films that have most influenced you and you kind of look at in terms of like, I would like to be at this level?
Oldboy, the Korean version.
Oldboy? Oh, yeah, that's amazing.
The Korean version of Oldboy.
Yeah.
The Shining. The Shining is the Korean version of Oldboy.
Okay.
Or Bill Volume 1.
So much more effective, the ability to kind of like take your time with the story,
I like movies that take their time. I like those stories. But I understand why as well, because, I'll find myself scrolling through Netflix trying to choose a movie, and then I'll look at the runtime and be like, do I really want to sit down for 2.5 hours right now, or do I want to watch like an hour and a half movie real quick and be done? You know what I mean? So I understand why in the U.S., because we're kind of more ADD.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot of people talk about like the American film market, and that now, a lot of buyers will come in and they'll only watch the first 10 minutes of your movie. So people will they'll go so far as to, if they have a monster movie, they'll even put the monster at the beginning of the movie, which is kind of like the worst thing you can do. It kind of kills the mystery, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, 100%. We now have this thing in horror movies that you want to put a teaser. You got to have a kill happen in like the first scene.
Mm-hmm.
So that when they're watching the movie, they're like, oh shit, this movie's going to be crazy. It's the same thing with Netflix. Like, somebody will watch the first 5 minutes on Netflix. If they get bored, they'll turn it off and go to the next movie. So you got to grab them in that first 10 minutes. It's also why you see so many movies that have a really good first 10 minutes and then the rest of the movie's crap.
Yeah, I have kind of noticed that. It's funny because I was talking to another screenwriter who was talking about how the format has changed and filmmakers have started changing their beginnings so that, a lot of movies start in their second act or the end, almost towards the third act. And then they go back and start it over and one of the reasons why they started doing that kind of structure was because they needed to have something really interesting in the beginning. You know what I mean? Like I can't think of a good example now, but it'll have like the part where the protagonist is right, at their lowest moment, and then it'll go back to the beginning of the first act. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. I mean,
and that's kind of purely that kind of idea.
Look at John Wick. We saw the end of the movie before the beginning.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So, do you now that you deal a lot with video on demand, do you have any sort of insight into working with I know you have other people that deal with a lot of that, but what is your take on the current kind of state of distribution and video on demand and Netflix and iTunes and all that stuff?
I think it's all going to go VOD soon. Like DVD, Blu-ray, it's all going to be phased out. It's all going to be VOD. And I think, you'll buy a movie and have a login, and it'll last forever with your login in the cloud. So you'll have your own personal Netflix of all your own movie collection, just in the cloud wherever you go.
Right.
Eventually.
Yeah.
I'm also shocked that this hasn't happened yet, but I feel like at some point very soon, we're going to see curated Netflix. Because why wouldn't you, you turn on Netflix and it goes, top 10 films recommended by Quentin Tarantino.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to figure out what to watch. You don't want to watch the top 10 films that Quentin Tarantino thinks you should watch? Or, the top 20 films that Seth Rogen thinks is funny?
Right.
I think that's going to end up being a thing.
That's actually a really good idea.
Yeah, it's going to be a thing very soon.
They have a little bit of that with Rotten Tomatoes, because you can see the this actor's favorite movies and stuff, but you can't. There's no direct link there.
That's just an actual thing on Netflix. Type in your favorite actor, celebrity, and they'll give you their recommendations. Is
it still as mysterious, the numbers that come from VOD, in terms of what they're pulling? I know that Netflix is one thing where they don't really tell people how well they're doing or whatever, but is there, what do you do after a film goes on to VOD? Do you have any concept of how popular it is or how much?
Yeah, you can check sales, constantly. I mean, not on Netflix. Netflix just does an outright buyout, but you'll know how popular it is. You won't know how popular it is in comparison to the other movies.
Mm-hmm.
Because, let's say your movie is ranked 200 and another movie's ranked 10. You don't know what the difference between 200 and 10 is,
mm-hmm.
but you know how well yours is doing.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Is there, what is for you, what has been the most, profitable, platform that's out there?
Well, my most profitable movies have all been ones where I don't get to access all that stuff. Those are the ones where I've, been hired to write and direct, and a producer or a production company is dealing with all that stuff, and then I've been bought out.
How have you are you working with a producer and people that are doing a lot of that stuff for you, or has there been one of your films recently, I don't know what the situation was with Bethany or any of the films that you've
Bethany
done?
hasn't been released yet,
Okay. But do they already have a built-in distribution deal and all that, or are you going to go through the?
We pre-sold Bethany.
Okay.
I financed the movie off of the pre-sales.
Okay. Is there any? Can you discuss how that works a little bit, or is that kind of top secret?
You get a concept for a movie.
Uh-huh.
You talk to a distributor. You find out what the market trend is. You have a distributor that's interested in working with you because they wanted one of your other movies that they didn't acquire. And then you say, if I make something within that wheelhouse with these people in it, what would you pay for it? They write on a piece of paper, I'd pay this much money. They sign a contract guaranteeing that kind of money. And then you show that to an investor saying, hey, if I make this, I get this kind of money.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go, okay, well, then it makes sense to, risk this much money for it.
Okay. But they're not actually giving you, they're giving you the, what's it called? The minimum guarantee, is that right?
Yeah, a minimum guarantee.
Okay. So you can go to your investors and say, okay, this distribution company has, so you're not risking it. You know that you're going to have a buyer if these things. Is there any legal thing that says, hey, what if they decide that they're not interested in it after that, or does that ever happen?
Well, from my experience, what we've structured is a deal that, they were involved from the beginning. They were involved in development, so they knew every step of the way what was going on.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So they were involved.
Right. And that's the actual distribution company, or is that a sales agent?
The actual distribution company.
Okay. And they do they have worldwide rights and everything after the film is given to them, or what? How does that work?
Yeah, but we're gonna work together to sell the foreign rights. So we'll be taking it to the market together, and yada yada yada. Okay. So are you going to AFM this year to Oh yeah, I'll be there.
Have you been there before? I assume.
Every
what is that like? How has your experience been there?
Every single movie has the same actor on the poster every year. It's one of 3 actors that rotate every year. It's on every poster.
And is that Eric Roberts?
I can't say who it is. I will not. But every poster has actors on it.
And so you can just tell me if this is right or wrong. From what I understand, the most of the distribution companies are primarily looking for a really good trailer and a really good poster.
Yeah,
and
pretty much.
How much can you talk about? Not in terms of your films necessarily, because I know you probably don't want to give away too much. But what is the? Can you talk about budget levels at all? Are we talking $500,000 movies, or are they all over the place?
They're all over the place.
Okay.
They're all over the place. Yeah.
But say for example, a indie filmmaker wants to make a horror movie, doesn't have any stars, has a concept. Where should they go with that? Do you think they should talk to a sales agent before they ever make it, or should they kind of see what the market is like? How can people kind of hedge their bets?
What's the concept? Is it high concept? Is it a high concept idea? It all depends on what the concept is and what the market trend is.
Mm-hmm.
And then you want to make sure that you're on the up of the trend, not on the down of the trend. If that makes sense. Found footage was really big a while ago, but don't make a found footage movie now. You know what I mean? You have to make sure you're on the right trend. A couple years ago, everybody wanted a dragon movie. A movie that had a dragon in it. I'm not kidding. That was every buyer at AFM was do you have a dragon movie? So everybody was rushing around trying to get dragon movies made. And now, you bring a dragon movie to, this was 2 years ago, you bring a dragon movie to AFM, nobody wants a dragon movie because I'm a dragon movie. A year
Get out of here
before.
with your dragon movie. Yeah.
They got too many damn dragon movies.
Right.
I'm not kidding. So it's you gotta know where the trend is and try and be ahead of it instead of, being on the tail end with a dragon movie that won't sell. So
there's that one poor guy in the corner with his dragon movie that nobody pays attention to.
There's one dude who has 8 dragon movies going on. No, I'm kidding. There probably isn't, but you got to be smart.
So what's the trend now? What's the big thing that everybody's going after?
I don't know if I should say. Well, because it's not that I don't want people to do it. It's that I don't want people to quote me on it being the trend, because then by the time they probably get the movie started and made and finished and ready to be sold, it won't be the trend anymore.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because it'll take a year, all through financing, creating all of that to get the movie finished and ready to be sold. So by that time, it won't be popular anymore. You see what I'm saying? So right now, talking animal movies are bigger.
So,
but in a year, I don't know if they will be. Because 2 years ago, dragon movies was all everybody wanted.
I mean, it's tough, you know. I've heard a lot of, you know, we've talked a lot about AFM on the show, and it's difficult to be a filmmaker who's just trying to like find what's going to be the next big trend. You know what I mean?
It's like, you know, you don't want to be that filmmaker. You want to be the person that gets hired to do those kinds of movies because somebody else is already following those trends. So you'll see somebody who's like, yep, we're making a dragon movie. And it's like, you know, they knew 2 years ago that they were making that dragon movie because, you know, an
right.
AFM hire, somebody had mentioned, hey, you got that dragon movie? You know, how many dragon movies have you seen? But, like, it really is a thing.
Yeah, I don't think I have seen a dragon movie in a very long time, but I'll take your word on that.
It wasn't the American buyers that wanted it. It was the foreign buyers wanted dragons.
Well, talk about that for just a second. I know you got to go, and I'm kind of like wrapping up. But I mean, can you do you have any advice for what things are, you know, on a purely like looking at a film that will sell internationally? What are some of the kind of rules that you can follow?
I think with horror, you'll be all right if you stick to, you know, try and do something that's more elevated. Try and do something that's more, you know, of a supernatural type horror film. You know, something that you can picture like a date night horror film. You know what I mean? Like, which is funny because a lot of my movies aren't like that. They're super intensely gross and violent. Try to stay away from the crazy violence and do more of the other kinds of scares because that seems to be what the foreign market likes the most. Yeah,
I've heard Japan is a very good market.
Yeah. Well, Japan will be like, I want a giant robot movie.
Okay.
But like, I want a giant monster movie, and they'll explain like how big they want the monster. Like they'll literally, you know, Asylum sells so many of their movies. Like Japan loves those creature type things. You know, those disaster creatures, sci-fi type stuff. That's another thing that's also kind of, we're still in that moot area for the market, so people can understand where nobody quite understands yet or knows how much. Even not amazing VFX, but how much visual effects cost. Sometimes, you know, you, even if it's not amazing, you still have a lot of visual effects, and it had to have cost something. So, you know, budgets are able to seem higher when you have a lot more of those visual effects types. Why you see a lot of those heavily visual effects movies come out is because, you know, buyers aren't able to always tell that it's a lower budget production, but it has, you know, a couple names and a lot of visual effects. If you do like a giant monster movie, you know, did you spend like, you know, $1 million or did you spend $2 million? It's kind of that level of like, who knows? So you're able to get more money for that kind of thing. I
mean, a lot of these I would say well below $1 million, to be honest, you know. I mean, it's from what...
budget, that's the one thing in movies. Budgets are always this ephemeral thing that, like, you know, nobody's ever quite clear on how much has been spent on anything, because nobody ever wants to say how much they spent, which is why, you know, people got all surprised when I did To Jennifer, and I told everybody I spent $500. Everybody else wants to like be like, oh well, you know, it's under $1 million.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I was talking to some other people that deal in distribution, and they were talking about how, you know, if you shoot something for ridiculously cheap, like, you know, one of the big things was, you know, Robert Rodriguez and those stories, but unless that's like a really big part of the story, you know, how cheaply you sold it, the other side is you always want to tell distribution companies and sales agents and everybody that you paid a lot more, because that becomes like a tool for them to negotiate. Because if they know the movie was made for $50,000, they're going to be like, oh, well, they're going to calculate how much you need to make and make their offers based on that, you know? Are there any mistakes that you see filmmakers making? I mean, are there common things that it's like if they just changed this little thing or that little thing, they would be doing a lot better?
Yeah, not getting adequate coverage. That, and then also not promoting their stuff. You know, you don't know how many times I see somebody make a movie and then they're just like, oh, I'm done.
Right. Can you go into that just a little bit, the coverage part? You know, what is that something that happened on your first films, that you got into the editing bay and kind of didn't have what you
know, I mean, now I get, in every scene, no matter what, I get what I call general coverage. Unless I've structured the scene to be a oneer, but I'll get general coverage, which is like, you know, your master, your close-ups, your over-the-shoulders, and like a couple inserts. That's, no matter what, I get that. And then I start going in for my finesse, like adding the style and stuff to what I want to get. so that no matter what, I at least have something to cut the scene together. Because nothing sucks more than being in the edit bay and going, oh man, I needed like 5 more shots and didn't have it.
Do you ever do storyboards?
Yeah, when there's time and money for it, for sure. You know, then you can really set the mood of the scene. Plus, like, you know, audiences nowadays like cutting your movie. You know,
what about shooting like action scenes and stuff like that? Is there any kind of like different way of dealing with that? Do you like to say what? Sorry, go ahead.
Get a shit ton of coverage. You know, get so much coverage.
All right, man. Well, awesome. I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing all this stuff. Is there any way, you know, can I give people your info in terms of like, can they follow you on Twitter? Are there any websites
follow
you'd
me
like
on
to promote?
Twitter. Follow me on Twitter at James Cullen B.
Okay.
And you know, reach out and say hi.
Okay. All right, and your new film, Bethany, what should we expect with that? Is that going to be out?
It'll be out early next year, and it is. I think it's my best film, and it's really freaky, and it's some ghosty type stuff.
No dragons, though, right?
Well, it's a ghost dragon.
Okay.
No, there's no dragon. No dragons.
You don't want to be that guy.
I think we just came up with the title of somebody's next movie. Somebody needs to make a movie called Ghost Dragon.
Ghost Robot Dragon. You just want to make sure you got your Japanese market in there.
Ghost Dragon robots. Now we got a few of them.
Damn, man, I wish we hadn't said that. I'm going to have to cut that out because that's something.
Yeah, well, and I think we should have Gary Busey voice the Ghost Dragon robot. And we'll be set. It'll be like the land before Ghost Dragon robots. You know, the never-ending Ghost Dragon robot story.
Have you ever been in a screening and somebody's like, you know what this needs, man, is more Busey?
I feel like I'm in every screening and I say that. Like every single one. You know?
There's nothing that's not better with a little Busey in it. Just throw him in there. I don't care what he does.
You know, I'm like half joking, but at the same time, like, I think like one of the most ingenious things ever was this movie made by Full Moon called The Ginger Dead Man. And it was about a killer gingerbread man voiced by Gary Busey, which was like the most awesome thing ever.
Man, I would definitely watch that.
I watched it. It was awesome. It was so awesome. I've watched it many times now. That's like that I watch.
It's your go-to.
That's my go-to. That's my dragon movie.
All right, man. I appreciate it. I'm going to take off, but it's been a pleasure, my friend. Thanks for calling and talking to us.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, that's going to do it for today. I want to thank my guest, James Cullen Bressack, for coming on the show. Don't forget to go to ifamasters.com and sign up for our free masterclass starting on November 17th. And don't forget to grab a free book at ifafreebooks.com. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Academy podcast. Don't forget to join our newsletter for more tips and tricks on how to make and market your film online. Go to www.indiefilmacademy.com.
The hell's about that box?
Dallas? You're gonna have to hold your position for a minute. I've lost the signal.
What? You sure?
Look around. Are you sure that it's not there? I mean, it's got to be around there somewhere.
Checked it out, Lambert. You may be getting interference.
Dallas, are you sure there is no sign of it? I mean, it is there. It's got to be around there.
Dallas?
All right. Am I clear, Lambert? I want to get the hell out of here.
Oh, God, it's moving right towards you.